In this video, we will discuss a use of verbs in the subjunctive mood, the cum clause. Now, we've already seen the word cum in Latin being used as a preposition with the ablative case. For example, we've seen an ablative of accompaniment. Cum amico ambulat, he walks with his friend. In this sentence, the phrase cum amico is a prepositional phrase, an ablative of accompaniment, using the preposition cum plus an ablative case. We've also seen the ablative of manner. For example, magna cum diligentia fratrem quaeremus. We search for our brother with great diligence. In this sentence, the phrase magna cum diligentia is an ablative of manner, using the preposition cum plus the ablative case. Now, the word cum in Latin can also be used as a conjunction to set off a subordinate clause. Let's look at some examples. Cum Python terror populis esset, Apollo interfecit. Since the python was a terror, a source of fear for the people, Apollo killed him. Now, notice that the main verb in this sentence is interfecit, and the subject of that verb is Apollo. And the first part of our sentence is a subordinate clause, starting with the word cum, which we translated as since. So we might mark this as subordinate. We have the subjunctive verb esset. Our subject of that verb was the python. So, since the python was a source of fear for the people, Apollo killed him. Let's continue reading about Apollo and the python. Cum Apollo Pythonem interfecit, Cupido apparuit. When Apollo had killed the python, Cupid appeared. Now, again, note that the main verb of our sentence is apparuit, and the subject of that verb is Cupido. Cum again sets off a subordinate clause, where interfecit is the subjunctive verb, Apollo is the subject, and Pythonem is the accusative direct object. And here we translated cum as when. When Apollo had killed the python, Cupid appeared. Now, as you might notice, both Apollo and Cupid are gods who use a bow and arrow. Apollo has just used his to slay a monster, but Cupid, the god of love, is a bit more playful. So Cupid says to Apollo, Cum arcus tuus omnia figat, meus tamen te figat. Although your bow, arcus tuus, pierces everything, mine, nevertheless, will pierce you. Now, the main verb of our sentence is the future tense figat, and the subject of figat is meos. Imply the word arcus, my bow, meos arcus. And again, our sentence started with a subordinate clause, starting with cum and going to figat. Our main verb is figat, arcus is the subject, and omnia is the accusative plural direct object. Although your bow pierces everything, nevertheless, mine will pierce you. Notice how cum again sets off our subordinate clause, and this time it was translated as although. So let's talk about the cum clause. A cum clause is an adverbial clause that gives additional information for the sentence. So from our examples, we saw the basic sentence, Apollo interfecit, Apollo killed him, the python. But we can add additional information to this sentence using a cum clause. For example, cum Python terror populis esset, since the python was a source of fear for the people. The main idea of the sentence is still that Apollo killed the python, but we've added to this sentence the reason why Apollo killed the python. Cum clauses can have 3 shades of meaning. And I say that there are 3 shades of meaning because sometimes it will be difficult to tell what cum... No, I say there are 3 shades of meaning because sometimes it can be difficult to tell which definition of cum is the best one. You'll have to use your judgment for what makes the most sense in any given circumstance. But there are not always clear distinctions between each of these 3 shades. Now, the first one is the circumstantial cum. This is when cum means when. There's also, number 2, the causal cum clause. This is when we translate cum as since. And third is the concessive cum clause. This is when cum means although. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule, but often you will see the word tamen, or nevertheless, in the main clause of the sentence to pair with a concessive cum, although. So, for example, we saw earlier, although, Cupid said, although your bow pierces everything, nevertheless, mine will pierce you. Now let's look at 3 examples of cum clauses, and we'll determine whether we're working with a circumstantial, a causal, or a concessive cum clause. Here's our first example. Cum literas missuset, discessit. Now we can tell that discessit is the main verb. There is no stated nominative subject, so discessit will also provide our subject. Our subordinate clause starts with cum and goes to missuset. The main verb is missuset, a pluperfect subjunctive, and literas is the accusative direct object. Now, we might translate this first as, when he had sent the letters, he left. This would be a circumstantial use of the cum clause. Now, we might also translate this using a causal understanding of the cum clause. So, since he had sent the letters, he left. Now, both of these are possible, but in your reading you will need to determine whether you think the sentence means when or since. But in your reading you will have to determine whether you think cum means when or since. Here's our next example. Cum navigare timeat, in litore manet. Now, our main verb of the main part of the sentence is manet, and there is no stated nominative subject, so manet will also provide the subject. In litore is a prepositional phrase. Our subordinate cum clause starts with cum and ends with timeat, where timeat is the main verb. There is, again, no stated nominative subject, so it is implied from timeat, and navigare is an infinitive with timeat. Now, this sentence is a little bit more clear. I think this one has to be a causal cum clause. Since he is afraid, he remains on the shore. Again, there can be some flexibility with cum meaning since versus when, and so you'll have to determine based on the context. Here's our next example. Kenam parat cum aigra sit. This time, our cum clause comes at the end of the sentence, cum through sit, whereas sit is the main verb of that clause. Parat is the main verb in the main part of the sentence, and kenam is the accusative direct object. There is no stated nominative subject, so we'll imply it from parat, and aigra will make most sense as a predicate, so we'll imply subject again from sit. So we translate this as, she prepares dinner, cum, although she is sick. This sentence makes most sense if the two ideas are opposed to each other. She prepares dinner, even though or although she is sick. And so the cum concessive makes the most sense.